back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today is Estefania Melendez. She's from Venezuela, former ambassador of the interim government, the Guaido government, for those who have not been following the events there closely. She's an expert on Russian influence in Venezuela and Latin America, and she's a special envoy of National Assembly to Ukraine. So we will touch on Russia as well as Iran and China's influence in Venezuela. Obviously, we'll speak to Ms. Melendez's expertise before we get into these substantive issues of how Venezuela came to be this nexus of importance in the region for these countries and their alliance. Could you please tell us, and thank you so much for joining us, a little bit about yourself, how you got into politics and your experiences with the interim government and everything that happened?
Thank you very much, Irina, for your kind invitation and first for your interest on talk about this topic. So, well, I'm Estefania Melendez. I'm based in Sofia, Bulgaria for plenty years already. So my background is actually on financial sector. That has been I study accounting and auditoring, following the money, let's say. Especially on corruption, let's say. And how I started in politics, this is, I think, something that marked my life when the regime in Venezuela arrived. I was 12 years old. So I practically all my life, I have been having my country under dictatorship. So believing in democracy, it's something like automatically you become a part of this. And I remember when I was just a teenager, I was joining this protest in my country that started like from the very beginning since Hugo Chavez arrived to power. And then I moved to Bulgaria in 2009. And for me, it was like a mission to continue fighting for my country, for recovering democracy, no matter where I was. So I continue with my political activists here in Bulgaria, gathering with diaspora of Venezuela here, organizing, and also having some presence because today, now we're 7 million of Venezuelans abroad. We have the second largest migration crisis, and very similar with Ukraine and Syria right now, and we didn't have a war like this. But it's important, it always has been important for me that as a Venezuelan, it doesn't matter where you are, you should be a voice of your country to defend democracy and to fight against this authoritarianism, this violation of human rights. And this is how when I moved to Bulgaria, I also learn a lot about the history of this country, being on that side of the Iron Curtain, but living here, you feel it in another way, even after decades that it's supposed to finish, but you feel how it continue having a lot of influence. Bulgaria as a country has a lot of influence from Russia. And I kind of more understood in that moment that Russia is a very important player in Venezuela, and I specialized on analyzing, on studying what was the role of Russia in Venezuela. I understood that this was one of the key points that keep the regime in Venezuela. And well, when the interim government started in 2019, the National Assembly, I was part of one of the political parties in Venezuela, Voluntad Popular, that is the party of Juan Guaido. And well, they understood, I just felt the call, and it was the moment to defend my country and to represent the democratic values on that way. And since then, I have been also very focused on analyzing the Russian influence in Venezuela and promoting policies also in the interim government, and also with the allies, with the United States, in terms of sanctions. And this is how we are here, also supporting Ukraine and analyzing also how the Venezuela may be involved even in this aggression.
Back at that time, did you get the sense of whether the international community and the US in particular, did they understand the role of international actors such as Russia in supporting the Maduro regime, or was the focus only on the regime itself? Was there a sense of trying to move these actors away from Venezuela as a sphere of influence?
Well, when we talk about the international community, I think we need to make a differentiation depending of what countries we're talking about. In the case of the countries that support the interim government and democratic opposition in Venezuela, I can divide it in, of course, the US and Canada, the Latin American countries, and Europe. And each of them has like different perspective about what is the importance of these actors in Venezuela. I think maybe the vision from Europe, and as I'm in Europe, based in Europe, I was in charge also to highlight this with our European partners. And well, you see, they even didn't believe that that Russia will attack Ukraine. So somehow they also, in our conversation, maybe didn't believe that Russia was really threat for us in Venezuela, or that they were involved in a very malign way. United States was for sure more clear, and well, the UK, I can put UK with with the United States, they were also more clear. And with the Latin American countries has been particularly difficult to talk about this topic. And where I have plenty of conversations with diplomats also during these years in the interim government. And it was also always a topic that called their attention very much about to understand what is the really influence that Russia had in Venezuela. But I always, and it's my maybe personal experience that I had, they were like, but it's not that important. Like Russia always want to show that they have more influence that they really have. Like, you know, they just will send some strategic bombers just to, you know, show that they have some presence, but it will not pass from that. And it has been this more or less the general comments that they really didn't see the Russian presence in Venezuela something to care so much about it. And this is something that I have been pushing very much. The United States, I believe they understand it very well. But well, also with the change of the administration, maybe some things seems to be for me sometimes a bit contradictory because it seems that this Biden administration is quite more specialist when it's about Russia. I mean, their team in the State Department and they really understand. They have worked very, very closely with the policies here, even about Ukraine. But they seems to have a different policy towards Venezuela and not really making this connection when it's about the presence of the threat that Russia may represent using Latin America, especially Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua as a platform. And for Venezuela, I believe I have seen is like their main ally or more powerful ally, say.
And I'll get to that point very shortly, but before that, I wanted to ask another question about the interim government, which is at one point there seemed to be a breakthrough moment where it appeared that it could have taken over or at least dislodged the Maduro regime from power. But at that key moment, the US government did not offer the type of support that was expected. What exactly is it actually true? Was that pivotal moment ever a reality? And to what should or could have US done to make it happen? And is it too late now?
Yeah, it was what happened with the interim government. I think that from the very beginning, they put the expectations very high. I mean, they start like with very high expectation that something will change in a short period of time, and it was not like that. And people start to get tired of it. They try their best. They implement this sanction program that also will follow very much by Canada. It was a good work that we have done on the level of the Organization of American States. But as you can imagine, and also Europe provide great support, not with these sanctions on the oil sector, but also reduce their businesses with PDVSA, with oil company. But you know, Nicolas Maduro also worked hard on that, the regime, and Russia especially provide them a lot of support and very diplomatic support to push also other countries, to push Europe, to not to give full recognition. I mean, you know, they don't stop working, and we should understand that it was an intent on 30th of April 2019 that it's supposed to be like a military uprising in Venezuela, and people believe that it could be the armed force in Venezuela could be against Maduro, but it didn't happen, and I think this was very bad in the end for all the process. And some reports indicate that Russia actually played a role, a very important role on that operation that in the end failed. And we need to understand also that the regime in Venezuela is a regime of terror. I mean, they violate human rights, and especially, I mean, as you know, Venezuela is the only country in the Americas that has a formal investigation open in the International Crime Court for violation of human rights and crimes against humanity. So, as you can imagine, when you have such a regime, to have a military uprising or protest in there, they don't doubt to attack the people. And with the military sector, also, especially, we have more than 300 political prisoners, that the majority of them are actually militaries. So they have a lot of controls on the military sector and on the process. I mean, they are very well on repression, let's say. And this is something that they play so much inside Venezuela with this repression. And also Russia push a lot in there. And well, then we have 2020, that was the year of the COVID, the pandemic, and this affected the whole world. I mean, it changed the political panorama, I think, of all the world, Latin America was the region quite more impacted by the COVID in terms of economic. So as you can imagine, when we were on this struggle with many limitations, that because of how it was the circumstances itself, and then to have this pandemic and this emergency in Venezuela, that is the country that normally had humanitarian crisis, that actually had caused this migration crisis. And then you have this pandemic. Well, it was very, very hard, even for us, for the interim government. It affects a lot, and also it affects the priorities of our life, because every country also were very focused on how to deal with their countries for the pandemic time. So I think it was very different things happening in the same time that impact the interim government success, let's say. And also, well, as many opposition in the world, they face a lot of challenge on how to keep together. And also we start to see many divisions. And well, to start an interim government from zero, and even a government that it was not a government in exile. I mean, even President Juan Guaido was in Venezuela, and his life was always in danger. It wasn't easy. They received a lot of pressure from the regime, and it caused also many divisions on how they see things had to be done. But we, in the end, I have to say that, well, the interim government protect many assets abroad for Venezuela. And we really could make a lot of bridges, could build a lot of bridges with the life. But well, it seems that the opposition couldn't really agree with each other what will be the path to follow. Because even when we have some succeed, well, you cannot focus only on one thing. I mean, this had to be a huge coordination that had to be done. The sanctions also, they were maybe not designed to be last for plenty of years. It also, they start to see that also will impact the people in Venezuela. So you see, we see the change on the policy from Europe, also decline a bit the support to the interim government and the National Assembly, and many voices like pushing to resume the relationship with Maduro. So we're right where we are today. There is no interim government anymore. We also passed for a kind of process of negotiation in Mexico City. And well, the opposition also focused very much on this process. Even when I'm all agree about this negotiation, it was something that this negotiation, in difference with other negotiation with the regime we had before, that for me mark like point that it was very negative, is that in this negotiation, Russia was sitting on the table. I mean, they were like, they call a companion country, like our delegation and Maduro delegation sit on the table. The facilitator was Norway, but each of delegations sit with a friend. We have Netherlands, and Maduro have Russian Federation. That I always try to highlight what that means for our country. I mean, for me, that was a lot of negotiation from the very beginning, only with the presence of Russia. I understood that Russia was not just an ally in Venezuela, they were actually sharing power somehow in the country. And I see it in the oil sector in Venezuela that I have been also analyzing. The presence of Russia was not only like a partner, but also redirected to political decision and how they made the decision taker. They were very, very involved. So for me, yeah, that from that point, it was not, it will be not good. And they suspended this negotiation, and I believe Russia was very into this decision. And this is how we are right now. And seems that Maduro right now is more strong than before. And when the Russian aggression started against Ukraine, I believe in that moment 1 year ago that will be an opportunity for Venezuela to increase the cost of the support that the regime of Venezuela was given to Russia. But it didn't happen this way. In opposite, many European voices start to say, well, okay, if we're going to embargo Russia, if we're going to sanction the oil sector in Russia, we need to diversify it, and we need to buy oil to Maduro. And also in the US, were voices like that, like, okay, that now make no sense to continue sanctioning Maduro regime because we maybe need their oil. And there start to this narrative somehow start to get more followers in the politics. And in effect, in the end, even the US tried to give some incentive to the Maduro regime. They easier some sanctions on the oil sector for Chevron. But in the end, this is not an incentive for Maduro to sit on the table or to give conditions for democratic and fair elections. It just gives him the position to be more stronger. And in the end, well, you see, they continue to be very partner with Russia. They even from I think that the first call that Vladimir Putin had after he started the invasion from a president, it was from Maduro. And he agreed to support his military operation, how called. And they have been having many of visits of high rank, and it's obviously, I mean, they support Russia. And I believe the war, when they think about Venezuela and the Western countries, the democratic world, they should see that the regime in Venezuela is an ally of Russia. They are more than allies. And if you facilitate something to the regime, it will always benefit Russia somehow.
And how did Venezuela, we know that Russia's role in the entire Latin America goes back all the way to the Soviet Union, the Cold War, the populist and so-called liberation movements. But what is Russia's interest in Venezuela now? Is it just the oil? How has Venezuela become so important for so many countries? Is it just the oil, or are there other factors that make it so important?
Well, I believe that it is for sure more than that. I don't think that this is alliance based on ideology. Not really. I think this is just for narrative about their ideology that they share. Well, these relations start to be more strong back then with Hugo Chavez in the power. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Igor Sechin, he actually was taking this relationship very close with the oil sector in Venezuela, but it seems that it was even something even personal. Of course, the energy sector and the oil sector was important for them. Venezuela is the have the largest reserve of oil in the world, but their industry is actually in very bad conditions, and not because of sanctions. But I strongly believe that what they really have in common and it makes them work together very well is the kleptocracy that they both exercise. These criminal activities, this is their partnership. I mean, this way how to make business in a shadow economy. And this is actually what they can more cooperate to each other. Because actually with Russia, Venezuela have signed plenty of agreements that actually any of them have bring any benefit to Venezuela. It has been always in laws. I mean, it's not that our country has really gained something for this partnership with Russia, and everything has been so in the shadow. There is no accountability for it. And you see, this is very much about corruption. I mean, the regime in Venezuela is a kleptocracy. They have stole our assets in Venezuela. They have destroyed a country that was one of the richest in the region with full resources. But they don't want this country to develop, to grow, to produce. No, they just want to steal money and take power, and you see it. They just destroyed this country and keep the power. And this is what they really have in common, and you see it by the alliance they have. I mean, what are the main allies of Venezuela? There are authoritarians, and you see it with Iran. Iran also has a huge presence in there. Also China, because they have given a lot of money to the regime, and this is how they ended there. And also, well, Venezuela under the regime has also allowed the territory to become the home of criminals. I mean, you have even cellulars of Hezbollah supposed to be in Venezuela, and they're even causing ecocide in one part in Venezuela with the illegal mining. They're destroying this, or Amazonas in this area, taking gold, what we call the blood gold. And Russia participates very much on this. China, Iran, even Turkey somehow very much on this. And I believe this is a strategic alliance for them. Venezuela is a country that it will be always strategic. It's full of resources, but geographically, it's important where they are located. And in this alliance, it's very convenient for Russia to have this platform. Moreover, that they can actually do whatever they want that they cannot do in other countries of Latin America. They have like very, let's say, open movement in Venezuela. Some reports even indicate that some troops of Wagner group were in Venezuela. They were even the people of protecting Maduro itself, this security. And of course, there is nothing good to expect from this relation, and also with Cuba and Nicaragua. I mean, they are partners in terror in the region, and they have bring this authoritarian regime to the region to work together.
What you're saying about Wagner is very important, because Prigozhin has made a huge show out of his alleged disagreements with various parts of the Putin regime, with Putin himself, with the defense minister, with various other oligarchs. And yet here we see what appears to be very close coordination between the general official Russian foreign policy and Wagner's role in all of this, which contradicts this very public narrative of disputes and disagreements. How does that work? Have you seen evidence of this political game being played in Venezuela? Uh, are these efforts appear to be joint, or is there a tension between them?
Well, when we talk about criminals,
Mhm.
it is difficult to believe that they can be friends, no, that there will be a loyalty uh, um, all the moment. I believe that just to give you some context, when the Russian aggression started in Ukraine, well, for Maduro itself, I think his relationship with Russia could seems to be toxic relation, because I think he was very afraid about the consequence when the war started. Nobody really understood how it will develop in that moment, and I think it was a shock even for Maduro. I believe that, and he also lost a lot of money in the beginning. He moved many of the financing of PDVSA, even some headquarters of PDVSA that used to be in Austria, they moved to Moscow. So when the war started, I think Maduro started to be very afraid he will not recover his money, because it was in Russia and because of the sanctions. And I think that started to be a game in this moment. The United States, in that moment, they made a visit to Venezuela to speak with Maduro, very high rank officials. That it didn't happen in the previous years. They even closed their embassy there. So I think in that moment also start this game of who will Maduro he will support Russia, or he will start to do something with this pressure from US, like if we remove your sanctions, you will not support Russia somehow. And for Russia was also important to understand what will be the decision that Maduro will follow. For them, start to see Venezuela even more strategic. So you see the contradiction even between them. I believe that Maduro just playing both games in the same time. I mean, to get rid or not of sanctions, to have a better relationship with United States, but they will always be partners with Russia. I mean, they cannot just break this relation. And you see this also with Wagner. Well, I think that there are some reconfigurations in Russia. And as I told you before, this is very much about corruption. I mean, the corruption has been the base of both regimes for some point. And I think that the Russian army and their operation in Ukraine has been failing, because it's supposed to be a 3-day war or very little time. And now we have more than 1 year. They have very high losses. And I suppose that Wagner didn't suppose to go and enter in Ukraine from the very beginning, because it's supposed to be not necessary. And it was, and they realized that situation is not like that. And also because of the corruption, because for corruption, maybe their armed force were not that powerful as they're supposed to be. And this creates some discrepancies for sure. And I think that for Putin, the idea to be seen to be exposed as weak, or that it has been failing, it's not good for him. I mean, We all seen his speech recently, that 2 hour speech when it was the year of the war, when he tried to convince maybe Russians inside Russia. I don't believe he will try to convince the free world that Russia, is still very powerful, that sanctions do nothing to them. But they all know that it's having some effect. And I think that Prigozhin has been exposing so much what is happening in the battlefield and the deficiencies that they have in the Ministry of Defense. But it called my attention. It seems that even Rosneft and Igor Sechin has been financing Wagner. Like, you cannot get resources with the Ministry of Defense. It seems that can have it from Rosneft, and also approved by the Secretary of Security Council of Russia, Nikolai Patrushev. He also proved that. And both of them were in Venezuela 2 weeks ago. So it's like very two high-rank visits. And it seems to be somehow connected. I mean, Rosneft in the March 2020 supposed to sell their participation in the projects and the joint ventures in Venezuela with PDVSA, because they don't want to be a target for sanctions. But in their practice, and they create this Rosneft, that this state-owned company from Russia, like they just created from nothing. And this become like the company who had this participation in this project. But in the practice, in the everyday in Venezuela, nothing really changed. It was the same employees, it was the same people from Russia doing exactly the same job, avoiding sanctions with Venezuela. And now that I think that Rosneft also, like, they don't care to show their relationship with the regime or their support for sure to the war in Ukraine. I mean, it's like they have been working also together on make a system, a financial system in the shadow that actually evade sanctions. And they, for plenty of time, even use Europe, the financial system, to do that. Now they work together on this with Iran also.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for that, they're just like, somehow Maduro is in the best position right now. Like, he has a win-to-win situation. Like, if the United States remove sanctions, or if they don't do it, it's like they already have the ways how to evade, and even not to have any accountability, and still more money from it, and and to develop more shadow economy in the countries. And I think this is better for them somehow. So this is something that the policymakers should pay attention to it, because it's like they really don't care if they show their support to the war in Ukraine, because it seems that there is not consequence for the Maduro regime to do that. It's even like looking even more strong. And for Russia, of course, this is beneficial for them.
What can we say specifically about those two recent visits? Are they connected? Were they connected to this secretive financial arrangement, or was there something else?
Well, I think there was very much of many things. First is, well, in December, like in 15th of December, it was the visit of the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia to Venezuela, they have intergovernmental commission that they call it a high rank intergovernmental commission between the two countries. And they have shown in this visit how they, even their military cooperation will increase. And now we have 2 weeks ago this visit from Nikolai Patrushev in Caracas, and they were discussing very interesting topics because, well, we all know his background. I mean, he's one of the closest person, seems to be the closest person to Vladimir Putin. He was his colleague in the KGB. Then when Vladimir Putin came to power, she was the director of FSB. And since 2008, he's the secretary of the Security Council of Russia. And they were discussing about how to avoid any color revolution. Yeah, you see, now we have this in Iran, that now they have almost 200 days on this. And of course, it's just not convenient to have such a scenario in Venezuela. And they were discussing also the role of the armed forces, the political police in Venezuela. Even in Venezuela, they are creating, well, the National Assembly controlled by Maduro. They recently are proposing, going to debate about this law, and well, we call it the anti-NGO law. It is it's the same as you have seen. It's the same script. Nicaragua also did it, and this, you see what is happening in Georgia right now is that Russian law, and how to control NGOs and how to mark international organizations there, or the international agents, foreign agents. So it's very much of the same. And during this visit of Patrushev to Caracas, they were discussing how was doing with this implementation, this law reinforcement of this law, and the role of the armed force on this. Because in Venezuela, this year the opposition is gathering, or they want to make this process of primaries to have one candidate, because it's supposed that we will have a presidential election next year in the 2024, and we're looking for one candidate to run the elections against Maduro. So it is in a scenario that, you know, I think that for Maduro, he had it very, very clear. He will not, and the democratic world should understand that this election may not be fair or democratic. And I think they are preparing together for any scenarios that can happen in Venezuela to make a change of regime and how to avoid that to happen. And after 1 week of this visit of Patrushev, discussing all this stuff, and then he went to Cuba, we had Igor Sechin. He went also first to Cuba, then to Caracas to some commemoration of the 10th year of the death of Hugo Chavez. But they met with the vice president in Venezuela, and to agree together plan for work together, Rosneft and PDVSA, how to increase production and cooperation in this field, when it's supposed that Rosneft left Venezuela. But obviously it was not this way, and they are looking ways how to deal with this situation together. And it was just something that happened, and maybe not many people knew it. In October last year, the Department of Justice in the United States gives some order of arrest to 5 Russians and 2 Venezuelans because to be involved in the same network, they were using a company in Germany, those Russians, and they used to trade with Venezuelan sanctioned oil. And this same company was acquiring US military technology in an illegal way that finished to be used in the Russian army against Ukraine. So in this accusation, you see how both cases are together. I mean, it was done by the same people in the same time, in the same year, doing this kind of deals. So for me, it seems to be obvious that even Russia, they were trading with the Venezuelan oil somehow and getting some benefits of that they use also to attack Ukraine. And this is how they had been using the resource of Venezuela, and Maduro has allowed this to use their resource for Russia to get benefits and use it against Ukraine. And this case was just an example, like the tip of the iceberg. And what else is there? I mean, this is, as I say, it's shadow relation. We don't know what they are more doing, and it's more criminal. But it's very obvious that Venezuela, the regime in Venezuela, I always make this differentiation of the country and the people and the regime. Not only support Russia, but somehow they finance and they support in a more active way for financial this aggression, this war to Ukraine. And Venezuela should be also be on the eyes of the democratic world to watch this relation very carefully, because they should be even target some sanctions for the implication on this.
Now, you mentioned the unrest in Iran. You mentioned the concern about these color revolutions. Is there anything suggesting that something like that could break out in Venezuela in the near future?
I particularly don't see that this will happen very easy. We have been having some protests recently, but nothing that will lead. I don't see that something that will lead it's happened in Iran right now. But because in Venezuela, the people feel like they have 23 years protesting, doing the same. They have killed many people in this protest. That many of for these crimes, they have this investigation in the International Crime Court. And since that they're not willing to do that, and we need to understand also that in only the last 4 years, 5 years, 7 million have left the country, and many of them, it was this part of the population that was more willing to go and protest, and they have left the country. And right now, I don't see that this is going to happen, but we never know. But just in case, I see that they are preparing in a scenario as this one, because if we have elections in 2024, and if opposition will win, I do not believe that the regime will just accept this and will leave the power. And if there is some protest of uprising in that case, I think they're preparing to make repression, very hard repression for it.
that of course raises questions. If there's no real prospect, why are they preparing all these additional repressive measures, and what does it do for them to crack down even further when nothing is likely to happen anyway? But that also brings me to another subject, which is what you previously alluded to, the secret financial system that they're trying to build. There's been a lot of discussions about BRICS creating their own currency to weaken the dollar and circumvent sanctions. Well, that may probably not happen anytime in the immediate future. Various financial arrangements with banks, and that, like we've seen between Russia and Turkey and Iran and some of the others, are certainly possible. How would something like that work? How does it work, and what can be done about it?
Well, I believe that mainly the US and European Union and intelligence, they need to really follow very much what is happening in terms of sanctions, because they're continuing selling this oil somehow, and of course through illegal ways. But we're not seeing many cases that it has a consequence on that. And right now, Irina, there are many people that say that the things in Venezuela are getting better. They see that this economical situation in there, it is going not that bad as before. But what is really happening in there is not that things are getting better, but that this shadow economy is somehow legalized in the country. Now in Venezuela, they don't even use bolívares. That is our currency. Everything is with the US dollars. Everything in Venezuela is with dollar in cash. Not because they don't have this banking like this. You cannot have it there. But that what it says to me, that actually this shadow economy is increasing more. And the people is a kind of feeling that this is something that is getting better for them, but it's actually the opposite, because it's making us to be more far and far of governability, or to have accountability. I mean, everything really goes more on the shadows that is on getting better. And this is this money from money laundering, that they have been transactional money laundering, that they have been moving in Venezuela, because now in there you even have Ferrari stores, or very luxury stores in Venezuela, very expensive. And it's actually, I have been seeing prices in there, and it's even more expensive than some European countries. In a country where you have people with $10 salary. You see that this is not very corresponding to reality. It's just a bubble that this is creating. It's just the rich people is getting more rich, and the poor people is getting more and more poor. But these rich people are not just rich people or successful businessmen. No, this is like this network of oligarchs that we see in there, that they are connected to these networks of the regime. And all this money that seems to be flowing there is the product of this shadow economy, that even make more differentiation between this oligarchs and the people inside Venezuela, not only in Caracas. And I think that the democratic countries should make some actions and measures on this topic, and not only trying to resume, because there is a trend, and we know, we've seen how the political map in the region has been changing. Now we will see it more to the left wing, and we're seeing how many countries now recognize Maduro. They resume their diplomatic relation that they broke before with the regime, and also the opposition helped them, no, by finishing the interim government. And you see now Colombia, they resumed their relation with Maduro. They opened the border, but they even realized that this is not that easy. They see that the people continue using these other ways because they get acquainted and benefit to this illegal shadow that is Venezuela. All Venezuela is about that. And PDVSA is just a machine for money laundering, just the huge. And also now Brazil is resuming also with President Lula, is also resuming the relationship with Maduro, and it will give more legitimacy to the regime. So as I said to you, they are trying to play a game of win to win. But I believe that the democratic countries, if they plan, at least, or even the United States, if they plan to release sanctions, they will resume, or even Europe, they need to start to asking for accountability to show, because, for example, PDVSA, this oil company, they do not launch reports from 2016. We don't know anything what they are doing. There is not a statistics in Venezuela that you can believe. They hide everything. So you can imagine what is really in there. There is a country with narco traffic. So everything about Venezuela and its economy is about illegal economy. And this, how can you control what is going on there, how you will resume this relationship with the dictators? You will just contribute. As a democratic country, if you resume it, you will just contribute to this system that they have created. And they should have put measures on that, because it's not like then like nothing has happened.
No, we are seeing this network of corrupt, nominally leftist governments that are driven more by corruption than even ideology at this point, come together and kind of strengthen one another. What impact do you think all of that will happen on the region and on regional security? And what role does Russia play in facilitating these ties?
Well, you have seen that in the region, we haven't seen a huge support of countries to Ukraine. I mean, it is a general condemnation of the war, but there is not a very strong condemnation against Russia. Even countries like Brazil seems that they even increased their import of fertilizer from Russia. And as I said, I mean, the region is very vulnerable. And after the pandemic, the COVID, they were very impacted, and they seem to be still in this process of recovery. And they have been also impacted by the increase of the price as consequence of the war and all the change supplies around the world. They have been also impacted by that. And they seem to be not ready to take measures that may be seen that it will impact more in this recovery of their economy. But I think it should bear more incentive from the United States, of the European Union. This is the moment where I believe that the United States should see Latin America with a lot of priority, and also the European Union. Because on the other hand, you have this authoritarian regimes that have some strong presence through their authoritarian regime that they are now resuming relation with them and like normalizing their relation. And you know that, as you see, that Russia has also even how they interfere in elections in other countries. So I believe that Latin America, I said, like a region that is very vulnerable. It's very vulnerable to disinformation campaign, to this propaganda. Even I have seen how they spread a lot of Russian propaganda and disinformation. And also the regime in Venezuela is contributing very much with this. And they openly state, I mean, in the regime in Venezuela, they have saying like, no, you will see, they were saying this some years ago, that the region will start to be like more red every time. They will, you know, become more on their side. And we've seen many changes in that direction. And Russia will use this in their benefit to challenge United States, to challenge the Western countries.
Interestingly enough, in reaction to all of these developments, albeit not specifically to Venezuela, the State Department recently, when the Iranian warships arrived to Brazilian ports, said that the Monroe Doctrine, which dictated U.S. security framework in the Western Hemisphere, in terms of taking action to prevent any foreign threats, is legacy of the past, and it doesn't really apply to today's administration. Well, that was in reaction to those ships specifically. That's sort of common sense a message to everybody in the region that basically US is not going to interfere with foreign activity in the region, even if it doesn't like that activity. Do you think that is the takeaway that Maduro is getting from the Biden administration's general policy in Latin America?
Yeah, I have seen very, well, me being from Venezuela and facing this regime, I have seen some declaration from the Biden administration on that direction that for me it's very concerning, because they're really advancing. I mean, I don't see the war in Ukraine that it's only a war like Russia against Ukraine. It's the war that is the authoritarians against the free and democratic world. And they play this way. This Iranian warship, they went there saying that this is for peace. And now they are the one talking all the time about peace and presenting plans and proposals about peace. And Maduro, if you listen to him, he's most of the time talking about it. But we know what is behind it. It is not peace. We see violation of human rights all the time. You see how they even are investigated for crime against humanity, as Russia is doing in Ukraine. So I think it's very dangerous if the United States doesn't take active measures on that, or just ignore it, because it is something like after this war in Ukraine started, I think the democratic world should take this as a threat, because this is what it is. And if you show weakness or you lack of actions, they will continue advance. They will continue doing it, and they will start to do it against the people on these countries. But this is a conversation that, of course, Europe and the United States, they have been also very impacted by the war in Ukraine. I mean, Russia did excellent work making this dependency of energy in Europe for plenty years. Now they have to diversify from one day to another practically. But I think the United States, Europe should listen, maybe more the countries like Poland or the Baltics countries, that has the experience and understand how the threat really works and what that means, and to take actions on this. Maduro is like a Trojan horse in that. He will try to resume relationship with the United States. They really have efforts of that direction. And but in the same time, he will not decrease his support to Russia. He will continue supporting Cuba. They work together and with Nicaragua. And I think that the region in this fight and even in this support to Ukraine, they have also to take care of what these dictatorships are doing in the region, because this is all part of the same conflict somehow.
We are seeing that the Biden administration is pursuing somewhat contradictory foreign policy goals, which allows people like Maduro to become power brokers of sorts, which is, on the one hand, the public goal is to put an end to the war in Ukraine and to get Russia out of there. But on the other hand, the goal is to get back into the nuclear deal with Iran, which Russia was previously facilitating, and which they are probably now using to their benefit to maybe not to get US to not provide as much aid as they could to Ukraine, for instance. That given that Venezuela has strong relations with both Russia and Iran, how do you think diplomatically Maduro can use this contradiction in policy by Biden to his advantage?
They work very actively on this. And I also, in this equation, I will also put China right now with a very active role on this. Now they are promoting also their view on what this international law and peace agreement should be like, even having some result in the Middle East right now. And also towards Iran, I think they should also pay attention very much on their activities. Even, in Venezuela, the biggest oil refinery in there, the CRP in Paraguay, the Amoy, they just signed some contract with Iran for them to fix this refinery, and they have another one in Venezuela. So they are increasing much more their influence in this strategic sector in Venezuela, and that they have been traveling and having a lot of presence, even flights direct Tehran, Caracas, or where this city is located. And we all know, Irina, that this is not this kind of relation of this kind of agreements are not only to fix this, because as we see in this case that I mentioned you before from October, the same network that used oil from Venezuela to trade and also to move technology, this kind of agreements with Iran, that they also move this kind of dual use technology. You create the path, you create this network, they're moving here and there. You don't know, this can be charged with other kind of technology that can be used in the refinery, but can be used in the military sector. Like 1 month ago, for example, I saw a tweet from the Russian ambassador in Venezuela saying that as part of their strategic cooperation in Venezuela, they will start, for example, to elaborate aeronautic parts, spare parts from the aviation, and even mention some words that since he was talking about drones. So you see that they're moving, they're very active on this, and how to move these spare parts, all this path that they use. And Venezuela is also important player on this. And in the same time, you have this narrative as for China, like they are now, they will establish like what will be the steps for peace and what to consider. So I think this is a big strategy that we have to see like a whole picture, not like separated things that happen and not related. They are all related. Because they think in the long term, and in their long term is to remain in power, this regime. So I think the democratic world should see this as that in the long term, not only for their, well, if you only have 2 more years in power, I mean, this is a threat that will continue there for plenty more years if the democratic world doesn't really make actions on that and really consider the threat as it is, because they will continue advancing on that.
Well, we can see that these sort of arrangements empower Russia. They prolong the war and they create the opportunity for the oligarchs to enrich themselves. They don't care how many soldiers die in battle, because their own resources are not really touched, because they're offshore, they're hidden, they use shadow economies and all sorts of informal arrangements, and they evade sanctions and they evade their own personal assets being seriously touched. If they can't come to the United States or Europe, they'll go wherever they can go. They'll go to Dubai, to Turkey, to Latin America, and they'll continue amassing their resources. And that gets us back to Ukraine, which is, this can continue indefinitely, and it is physically impossible to be constantly sanctioning everybody everywhere for everything, simply because you have to keep track of the entities, and the entities will always have new names and so forth. So what would be a better financial action plan on that front?
Yeah, that's the thing, because they get acquainted. When I was analyzing these networks of money laundering and sanction evasion of Venezuela, I have seen how you close some leak and they open another very easily through, different countries, even Switzerland or Panama, or, in Asia. I mean, it's very difficult. They are getting even, I think, more expert on how to avoid these measures. And as you very well said, they don't really they don't really care if their citizenship suffer any of these effects of I mean, you have seen it in the Russian army. They don't care if they go there and die. I mean, this is something that for them is normal. And even the people is the first people that will pay the effects on that. But that is why I think it's also necessary huge coalitions of oppositions and the regime that also make a strong lobby in democratic countries, and also work in coordination, because I think somehow there is also a lack of coordination among the free countries. But it's all about to be determined and to be more creative when it's about that. I think there is much more that they can do, but for some reason they are not ready to go that fast. There are a lot of manipulation and blackmailing from this regime. As you see, even Russia can blackmail with this nuclear threat. In Latin America, for example, people are the countries choose to be very afraid, like Maduro has a lot of military equipment, and I think behind that, they may not seem that strong, but they played that game, that they are very strong, and there is still a lot of afraid in the free world that they cannot be that determined somehow. But I think the world has changed, Irina. Maybe not changed, but the dynamic has changed very much since the war in Ukraine started. And for sure, different measures should be applied to deter this regime. I mean, there should be more on what they have to do, because as you say, this conflict, they will design for these long-term conflicts for them to create kind of status quo also that is also working on their interest. And in the same time, this continue the violation of human rights, the deaths of innocent people, of civilians. And we see how, some people also get tired. As Venezuelan, I see how some even allies get tired about this Venezuelan conflicts, and it will also may happen with Ukraine. So I think that the world should, the free world, but should do everything what is in their hands, and even create new mechanisms to fight on this. But we still, this is in this democracy index from 2022. Well, you see that seems that majority of the world live under authoritarian regimes or more than democracies, so-called kind of democracy. So it's a tendency, but I think that the democracies of the world should work more coordinated.
And that brings us to the last point that I want to explore, which is the lessons for Ukraine from all of this. We know that they've been trying to kind of not only break free from Russia's invasion, but also from the Soviet and Russian invasion by corruption. The impact of the old system that has caused a lot of damage on the ground, made it more difficult to move forward, and weakened the country before the war. So there's been efforts to try to fight this corruption, which is never going to be easy, because corruption, once it takes root, getting rid of it completely is not difficult, because you have a war, you have to fight with whoever is there, and fighting two battles at the same time is overwhelming. What lessons can be drawn from Venezuela's struggle with this corruption and plutocracy to Ukraine? What can they do better? How can they move away from this to ensure that they have transparency, that they have accountability, and that they get rid of these leftovers from that are undermining their war effort as well?
Yeah, I believe that Ukraine, even before the war started, they have a lot of challenge on this, even for their perspective to become part of the European Union or NATO. I think these efforts have to continue to even increase that, because also there are many narratives that supposed to be Russian disinformation, that they will also get some from this, that you even see it in the US. There are voices that like, you're just giving money to Zelensky and he will steal that money because they're very corrupted country. And I think the accountability is very important. But I know that there are also cooperation with the agencies that, because as the Venezuelan opposition, when we were in the interim government, we were also targeted with this kind of narrative, that this support that the United States give for humanitarian aid, we steal it. And it was not exactly that way, because the US, they have their own mechanisms and programs how to implement this aid. I mean, you cannot just steal that money because they just don't give it to you in your hand. But I believe this is very important for Ukraine to show their efforts to fight the Russian aggression from a democratic perspective. I mean, and this is the challenge we also have. I mean, you have to fight against Russia, against this regime with behavior as a democratic country that it also have to fix these problems in the same time. In the same time, you're facing the war. And it's the only way that they will assure somehow also that the democratic world will continue supporting them and will believe in them and to defeat Russia in the end, or if they will have an agreement in some point. But it's important to have transparency on what they're doing and to make the reform necessary also for their path to a European Union member.
Thank you so much for this perspective, because with someone from coming from someone with your experience, this is a very meaningful insight, and it's meaningful for people to hear, how about the corruption reality, its impact, why it is a serious and all-consuming issue. Once it starts, it's very difficult to stop, much less turn back. But at the same time, it's also, you need to keep things in perspective, because right now
Exactly.
you have an actual kleptocracy that is brazenly violating laws, and then you have a country that is struggling with issues, but is genuinely dedicated to making progress. So I think people need to kind of understand the difference and react appropriately to these issues, and hopefully also draw lessons from the past and not allow this corruption to take root right next door, because at the end of the day it comes back to the United States through cartels, through oligarchs, through illicit accounts, through undermining of our own policies, and through difficulties to our own interests in the region as well.
Exactly like that. I think this is the base. I mean, you see how even the corruption has made Russia to fail in their objective, because that's the truth. I mean, many of them prefer to steal that money and to have some villa in Italy or in Switzerland, some jet, and they didn't implement that money on the army. And you see it in the result on the battlefield. So the transparency, it's important. It's part of the respect of human rights, because in the end, the corruption is a violation of human rights. How you implement these actions, this budget of the country, it will make a difference between an authoritarian corrupt country and to a democratic one. And I think this has to be the base of the values for Ukraine, for Venezuela, and for the oppositions of the world that are facing and fighting against this regime.
Currently, Venezuela is playing, as a very powerful player, is playing a very negative role in the region by driving even other countries kind of closer together and closer to foreign powers, China, Iran, Russia, that are absolutely anti-Western, absolutely corrupt, authoritarian, and aggressive and hegemonic. But it could also in the future be playing a completely opposite role because of its potential. The potential could be used for the positive. It could be used to drive anti-corruption, to drive more beneficial relationships, and to drive, from its history, to drive a more transparent and better regional leadership and regional policy. So I am hoping that this understanding will kind of help people and opposition to break through the hopelessness, the divisions, and to start looking at the future in a more positive way, because that can bring better results. If you think about a positive goal, that can focus you from the things that drive you apart to things that can help you get your policy together and help you succeed. Because right now the current status quo, it's not sustainable, it's destructive, and it's like it's anarchy. It brings everything more, it turns more it's like the force of entropy that causes everything around you to go in shambles more and more and more. So that needs to be fought. Thank you so much, and thank you for your perspective, and for everyone watching this. We were having a conversation with Estefania Melendez about Venezuela and its regional role and its relationship with Russia, and how and its impact on the region, on Ukraine, on the US and its policies, uh, and how it has come to become such an important player amid the axis of resistance between Iran, China, Russia, anti-American forces, and what, if anything, can be done to start turning things around. We will be back next Tuesday, 9 p.m. as usual, the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. Thank you for joining, and have a good night.